Hello and welcome to CEO's Guide to Sales Brilliance. I am Janice B. Gordon, the customer growth expert, host of Scale Your Sales Framework and podcast. And I'm absolutely thrilled to have you all joining us for this dynamic session. So today we have two incredible guests, and I'd like to introduce Laurie Richardson. Hello, Laurie.
Hey,
Laurie,
Jen.
hi. Laurie from School More Sales, and also our very special guest. Hello, Alice Heimer, the Sales Strategist for CEOs. Now, together we're going to unravel proven strategies and insights for CEOs that need to propel their sales teams and their sales game to new heights. So we have a lot to talk about, but first of all, really, I wanted to kind of like give you a heads up of why this is such an important subject for us to be talking about. The stats are on founders and CEOs with sales knowledge. Those that have the sales knowledge are really compelling. So when we think about CEOs, we don't always associate them with sales, but it's more common for us to think of sales CEOs as finance people, accountants, and so forth. But actually, according to Chief Marketing Officer Matters, more than 25% of CEOs started in marketing or sales. Moreover, a survey from the Harvard Business Review found that CEOs with sales experience often lead companies with better revenue growth. So, and this is in their article, CEOs need to get serious about sales. So we are going to be getting serious about sales. So, first of all, I'd like to ask you, Alice, this is a real area of your expertise, your podcast, Sales Talk for CEOs. So why is sales knowledge crucial for CEOs?
Well, it's crucial for so many reasons, right? But I think the key really is that they drive sales whether they know it or not. As a leader of the company, they are truly the only person who can orchestrate all of the resources needed to support sales correctly, right? And to really support sales so that sales can focus on the customer, which we know today, customer experience is the most important thing. So the CEO is really the leader of sales, even when they have a CRO in place, because they're driving the overall strategy that will absolutely impact customer experience. I also want to just note, you mentioned that around 25% of CEOs have sales or marketing experience. So I want to say only 25% of CEOs have sales or marketing experience, which means, if they founded their company, even if they're 10, 15, 20 years in, right? They've learned sales sort of by hook or by crook, right? Because they weren't in sales. Now, on my podcast, as you know, I talk to many CEOs and I always ask them if they were in a sales role prior to becoming a CEO, becoming the founder of their company. And most of them were not. But it's such a different perspective when they did come for sales and marketing.
And I'm sure you've found this, Laurie, when we want to talk to CEOs because exactly what you say, Alison, they're the ones that have access to all the resources.
Right.
You often if you come in at a lower level, then they have to sell it up as opposed to selling it down. And any changes, transformation, we're all about that within organizations. So give me your perspective, Laurie, on how many CEOs you work with that have sales experience or really are savvy about sales and what difference that makes.
Yeah, it might coincide with that 25%, I think, which I agree with Alice is way too low. Like, if you don't know how to sell, it's the one thing for anybody listening, regardless of, your level, learn about sales, study it for a couple of years, because it will pay off in the future, whether you're climbing the corporate ladder to become a CEO or whether you're going to go off and be a founder yourself. You need to understand sales. And it's interesting because you cited Harvard Business Review, Janice, and I work as a sales coach with the Harvard Business School with their MBA program. And this is the one area they've only had sales classes for about 5 years, but they created them because that was the one thing that the students who graduated and went on to whatever roles that they were in, they said that was missing for them. And there was an old book called What They Didn't Teach You in Harvard Business School. If anyone remembers that, it's all about sales. And so sales is a missing piece, and now they incorporate it, and those classes are growing and growing, and they're adding more of them because it's been such a big hit. It's been so popular. So I definitely want to work with a founder or CEO who has sales background, because they understand what is involved. They understand this isn't just a formula we just throw together and works. There's some art, there's science involved, and the people are the key area there, that we have to have the right people in place in order to be successful.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's art and science. And I think what happens with founder CEOs who sold early on, right? So they may be now 10, 15, 20 years in, but early on, they did all the selling. They didn't know how to sell, but they were able to do it with what I call the entrepreneurial enthusiasm, right? That you can sell anything when you got enough of that. And then also they were able to get in places where salespeople with the title salesperson, AE, account executive cannot. And so they have this sort of false belief about sales. They only know the art of it. They don't know the science of it, because they use the art of it and their title and their leverage to get the very first deals their company ever got. And they never got the science part in. A lot of times they didn't get it in before they started hiring people, right, to do the job. And then this is where we hear about all the failures on hiring sales leaders and hiring salespeople early on. But even later on, with the companies I work with who are mature, 15 or plus years old, the CEOs still have this very old idea of what sales is, and they only understand the art of it and not the science. And so then they tell their sales leaders and their salespeople to do things that are, like, frankly, just stupid, right? And it really creates problems.
I worked with for many years an accelerator program. Often the companies are from startup, but they may be 5 years in, turning over, up to 10 million. And even then, so many of the founders wanted to talk to me. I taught the sales side of things and mentored them, wanted to talk to me about how they can get a salesperson in to do the sales. Right. It's like, what are you talking? You're the salesperson. This is your project, your passion. You've invented, you're the best person to sell. And not only that, in selling, you learn about what works for your unique market, customers, what to say. And also they want to recruit a big successful salesperson and pay them a ton of money, and that's often completely wrong for where they're at. So I know, Alice, you've probably come across this. They just want to offload that. It's one of those problem children that they can't wait to get rid of, not realizing this is the engine of the business.
Well, Lori and I have both seen it many times, right? They want to get sales off their plate as quickly as possible. And I agree with you. And I know Lori will say the same in a minute here, that in the early days of your company, and then I believe also sometimes as things change at your company, the CEO has to be involved in sales, right? So I always say the CEO will always have a role in sales, but that role changes as the company matures. So in the early days, not only do they need to do the selling, and they should hire an assistant to help them, because most CEOs are not going to be really good on the details, and that's where they fall down, right? So Don't hire a salesperson, hire a sales assistant who can help keep you on track. So you do the art part and let the assistant do the science part, and it'll meld together. And then document, right? So everything that works, because like you said, Janice, for every market, it may be a little bit different. And as you go into that marketplace and learn what's working and do the art of it as the CEO, the science will start to come clear, because what you do works. It worked again, it worked again, it worked again. So if you document all of that, now you've got a really nice playbook so that when you start to hire people, you have something to train them on versus, oh, just watch how I do it. Just do it like me. Well, let me just tell you, no salesperson can just do it like you as the CEO.
Right.
It will never work.
Yeah.
That's the hardest first hire, is the salesperson who, and this is why I don't often work with startups with the first hire, because it's just so hard. It's just like a specialty that I don't do. But what you said, Alice, that was really important, is you hire a salesperson next, not a VP of sales.
Right.
That's where a lot of people do. They do
well,
that.
I think you can just hire a sales assistant, somebody to coordinate and document all the things you're doing. Then I think you'll be ready for a salesperson, but not a sales leader.
Right. You need someone to do the work, to make the connections and make the calls, to build things up. And you need to tie it in with good marketing so that the salesperson doesn't have to come up with the value proposition and all the materials and
all the
that
messaging.
Yeah, exactly. It's bringing back memories. I'm getting like,
it's like, it gives you trauma, it's like traumatic situation. We've all been there. Like, oh, here, salesperson, here you are. Please call some people and get them to buy something. That's all I get. No, I no customer profile. I get no materials, no value prop, crappy website. I mean,
and it's sad,
right?
And it's sad because the economy is not at its strongest right now. So in the past, the charismatic founder could get people to go, oh, all right, I'll give it a try. Now they're like, we need 3 signatures, and I don't trust that this is going to do the job for us. So it's hard. It's hard to be that early salesperson in that kind of a situation.
And I think I wonder if you guys agree with me that the risk involved with buying from a startup or even just a company, if they're 20 years in, but they're so much smaller, right? So you've got these big Fortune 500 companies, and these smaller companies all want to sell them their software, their products, their services, right? And there's so much risk there with these big companies buying from them these days, because these companies are being acquired. They are going out of business. They are not financially strong. And the buyers are just wondering, wow, should I buy from a tried and true larger company, or should I really go ahead and try these smaller companies and startups?
Yeah, it's a massive risk. And that's what much of sales is. It's risk management, isn't it? It's deal management. It's not what we used to consider sales to be. It's so much more complex. So I'd really like to ask you, Laurie, how can the CEOs lead their teams to this sales brilliance, to really understand that perhaps 70% of the process is deal management, is that negotiation? How can they impart that knowledge that in their systems and processes with their people?
Well, I really like Alice's suggestion, which is to document everything and to just start keeping track, just like you would a budget or anything else, your profit and loss. You want to keep track of what you're doing so that you can get some outside help if you need it. And if not, you can, just help the next person that comes along. And I mean, I tell people this all the time, even with an existing sales team, you're going to have a new person coming along. So you need to have everything documented, and you need to think about the science and the steps that go into a repeatable process to allow you to have to fill your pipeline with prospective customers, and then to help them make decisions to work with you or not, and to move them along. So be really organized. And if you're not organized, like Alice is suggesting that some CEOs are not, have that assistant, have an admin role that is keeping track of things, and really build out your buyer information, who your buyer is, what do they want, what are their challenges, how can you help them solve them, what can't you help them with, what happens if they don't do something about it. And that's going to be some of the best information that you can gather.
I don't know if you've both had this experience, and the science of sales, and people are KPIing it up to the hilt, but they're actually measuring the wrong behaviors. So perhaps you can say something about that, Alison, making sure that you're measuring the right data that's going to have the impact and the results and the behaviors that you want.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Let me say a couple of things first that just came to mind as I was listening to Lori as well. The first thing is, you asked Janice, Lori, about what kind of brilliance do the CEOs need to bring to the table to really support their sales team and help them do well, right? And I'm going to add to what Lori said, that they need to stay close to the customer. I think that's the number one thing a CEO can do today, because when the CEOs stay close to the customers and they're involved at the right level with the right people at each customer, they can bring a lot of information to the senior leadership team about what needs to change so that we can meet the customer where they are and support them in their buying journey from hello to I'm your loyal customer. So I think that larger strategy belongs to the CEO and the CRO if there is one. But, in many cases in the companies, the majority of the companies in the world are not Fortune 500 companies, right? They're smaller, they're SMBs, and we don't have CROs in those size companies. We might have a VP at best, and usually a director or a manager. So the CEO really does lead that vision, and they can't lead it well without understanding the customer and staying close to that. So I think that's where that brilliance comes in, right? And then, back to that art and science again. Even if you're 20 years old and you're still trying to figure it out, there's nothing wrong with that. But back to that documenting and what Lori was saying, you pull the science out of the art. And how you do that is by documenting and seeing, because, well, I'll tell you a quick story. When my dad, Steve Heiman, and his partner, Bob Miller, first developed Miller Heiman together, they interviewed hundreds of salespeople, and they would ask them, they would ask the best salespeople, how do you do it? What are you doing? How do you do it? And most of the salespeople would say things like, oh, people just like me, or I'm really good at this, or things like that. And then they would dig deeper and deeper, and they could pull the science out of the art, because those salespeople who would say, well, people just like me, or I'm good at that, really we're doing the same things consistently over and over and over again. They just couldn't tell you that until you pulled it out of them. So they thought it was all art, but Bob and Steve pulled out the science and put it into their books. So that's why I think it's so important for the CEOs to document, because they will find that they are doing things repeatably that work, and they'll get the science out of it. Now that goes back to, what do you measure, right? Well, you're going to measure the wrong things if you don't know what the science is, right? Because you can't measure the art. Oh, they like me, I'm just really good at that. That's so hard to measure. But I believe, instead of measuring how many calls, how many emails, how many LinkedIns, how many sequences got sent out, what we really only care about is how many conversations did a seller have with someone who could potentially buy from them. And thanks, Lori. And so if we pair it back to that, sure, let's keep track of how many dials it takes to get a conversation, so we know, right? And sure, let's keep track of how many emails it took to get one conversation, so we know whether we need more or less, right? But we really want to focus on the quality and not the quantity. And if we do that, we will have more conversations every day. And I mean, look, no seller wants to sit around all day sending out emails and leaving voicemails. They want to talk to a human that they can help, so they can solve and they can sell something, right? So we have to start measuring quality conversations.
Yeah. And Crystal Lynn says, meet the customer where they are. That's what's really important. So thank you for that comment. Um, yeah, this is interesting, kind of like to delve into it a little bit more. Like the best CEOs call the management their toolkit of the sales process, and this is real engine. So, what would you say are your kind of top three things that you would say in terms of the strategies that CEOs need to have in place? What are you? And you've already mentioned a few of them, Alice. So, what are the top three?
Top three strategies. Well, first, there has to be a strategy around the customer experience, right? Which includes the customer journey. And if we don't have that in place, the rest of it is for naught, right? We're just focused internally and we're just only looking at what our sales process is. Yes, we need a sales process, but it has to match the buyer journey. And that is, encompassed in the total customer experience. So I think that strategy is number one. What is your strategy to provide an exceptional customer experience from hello to I'm your loyal customer? So I think that's important. I think the second strategy that CEOs have to have is how they're going to continue to up-level their people. I just don't see it. They throw an annual sales kickoff and have a speaker. They have a little bit of training here and there. It's very kind of hit and miss. But the strategy on up-leveling the leaders as well as up-leveling the people is absolutely crucial. And I just don't see those in place. And then thirdly, I'll say it's the hiring strategy that is so important. And I'm sure Lori can speak some more to this. But we, as CEOs, we have to have a hiring strategy, and that has to include building bench strength, because what happens when a good seller leaves is we scramble to replace them, and it's never a good thing, right? And again, we're going to lose the best sellers if we're not developing them. So that goes back to, point two. And we're also going to lose them if they see that they have to work with players who are subpar, right? A players want to work with A players. So you have to have a hiring and retention strategy. So those are my three.
Okay, Laurie, over to you. Your three.
Well, the first one I wrote down just now before Alice said it was leadership development, and Alice, you talked about up leveling the leadership. It couldn't be. It's just one of the most important things that can happen, because you can't just assume that salespeople know what to do. You can't assume that sales managers know what to do. They all need coaching and regular coaching. So we want to make sure that the managers are coaching the salespeople, but who's coaching the manager? That's probably the CEO. It's probably whoever is above in a smaller SMB company. That's going to be the CEO. So they need skills. They need to be developed on how to do this. And I think that if that one thing is done, where we know that we have strength in our leaders and our reps are being coached and developed, that's going to be a huge step beyond where most people are. Most people don't coach their salespeople on a regular basis, period, end of story. And I believe that we're going to see some AI tools and processes that will help the leaders of the company, will help the CEO by helping the leaders have conversations with their reps on a regular basis. And it may not even involve the sales manager. I think that sales managers are going to get data back that this is how their reps are doing. Fortunately or unfortunately, it's a change that I think is going to be helpful, because when I think about taxis and then Ubers, that, everybody complain about the taxi. Oh, it's dirty, it smells, they're never on time, they charge a lot. And then all of a sudden there came along Uber, right? And solved a lot of issues. And this is what people say about sales management. Oh, they don't coach their reps, on and on. Everyone talks about it. So I think that's going to be resolved in the coming months and year for sure. So that's one take that I have about that. Kind of went off on a tangent, but I think it's
I think we both agree vehemently. Leadership development is crucial. And most CEOs that I've met do not know how to coach a sales leader.
Yeah.
I don't think
Yep.
they know how to coach anyone, period.
Right.
But they don't know how to coach a sales leader for sure. So that is something CEOs need to level up on. How do I become a good coach and continue to develop my people? Or if I can't or don't want to, how do I hire a coach that will continue to develop my leadership team?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a hot one.
Okay, so I'm going to offer, I think I can get to 3. My first one would be data-informed decision-making in every aspect of your business. So whether it's recruitment, use the data you already have, knowing what your successes are in order to find other people. And we work on a system that does that. But also in terms of your customer, there's so much data in our business on our customer. But I often ask CEOs, what's the impact on your key customers? They're the customers they should be going out to and understand and be following and getting feedback on. What is the impact of your decision? And often it's like, well, I've not even thought about that. I'm just making this. Well, why are you making the decision if you do not know the impact of your decision on your key customers? So that's the first one. Second would be build a lean buying machine within your sales operation. And Scale Your Sales always talks about the buying process rather than the selling process. And that's what we need to be focused on. And so there's a lot of, it's not 180, it's a 360 turn to really think from the customer's point of view. And so my third one would be, sales is a team sport. And the way that happens, it's about being customer centric. So we're all focused on the same thing. Everyone in the organization is focused on the same thing. And that is your customers, your key customers, and all of the analytics. And it's really all of that should work in sync together. So being a customer-centric organization, using the data in order to do that and make sure that you're a buying machine and you're all aligned. So they would be my 3 things. Okay. So last word from my guests then. So Laurie, last word from you.
Alice touched on hiring, and I couldn't agree more that who you hire in the roles is going to be critical to your success or failure. And you want to have a process to do that. A lot of people know that I use a process that involves a tool to help assess core sales competencies, and with managers, core sales management competencies. It's the science part that I can't get right just by guessing. I've never gotten better than 50% in terms of hiring the right people. And so I took the pressure off myself by using science to help me do that. And it works wonders. So I'm going to suggest that people know how to, how else are you going to find whether someone's coachable or not? How else are you going to know if someone really has the will to sell? Because I'm going to say that in my interview. Oh yeah, Alice, I'm really dedicated and I want nothing more than to be successful. I could sell her on me based on what I've learned in sales to win her praises, to move me on in the process.
Yes, the salespeople are good at selling you on hiring them, aren't they, Laurie? Well, my last word, I'm going to give a shout out to Mark. Firstane, who is on with us today, and I got to interview him yesterday. He shared his story, which I hope everyone will listen to the conversation that Mark and I had, because he really shares where he failed in hiring salespeople and how he recovered from it. So thank you for that, Mark. And also, he made a comment there. Let's see if I can still see it. Professional athletes study game tape every day, and a lot of leaders and managers don't do the same. And so my last word is, yes, use the data, as Janice said. Use the data. That's your tapes, right? Those are your game tapes. You're watching them over and over again, right? You're watching that data. You're watching that data to provide an excellent customer experience. So what is an excellent customer experience? that's only can come from your customers. You need to collect data on that in order to ensure you're doing it and continue doing it, right? Developing leaders, you need to collect data. Where are they now? Where do you want them to be? What is it taking to get them there? What is the data that proves they've moved from one place to the other? So that's right, your game tape, you're watching it and you're seeing this data showing me something, and I use that to continue. And the same with hiring, right? Hiring and retention. There's data around that we can use to make sure we hire well, we retain, and we continue up leveling. So it's just kind of a big circle, but that data is what's going to help drive your decision making if you're keeping the right data. So yeah, and thanks to everybody who joined us today. How fun was this, huh?
We love data.
Yes. So thank you to my guests, Laurie Richardson and Alice Heiman. I've put in the comments there. Make sure that you go to the podcasts that we're all running, Scale Your Sales for Me, Conversation with Women in Sales, and Sales Talk for CEOs. The notes are in the comments. And just a heads up, my next live session will be on the 20th of March, Breaking Boundaries, Navigating Diverse Recruitment in Sales Roles. And that's with my guest, Lauren Langstoff-Roberts.
She's awesome.
She is awesome. She is awesome. And International Women's Day is coming up on Friday, and they have an event tomorrow evening, which I'm going to. This is Wiser Elite. So yes, make sure you join us then. So thank you both so much for a great conversation. Really enjoyed it. And you'll see the replays on our live and LinkedIn Lives and YouTube events. So thank you so much.